boys are learning about the world. Their home is in Eastern Africa. The huge and varied area comprising Kenya and Uganda and Tanganyika and Nyasaland and northern Rhodesia, all British dependencies. In some parts, European settlers have built their homes. Modern cities have grown up, full of busy activity. There is a white man's Africa, and it seems prosperous enough. Side by side with the Africans, the European carries on his own trade and commerce. He brings new crops and new methods. The tung plant from Asia grows well in Eastern Africa. With African labor and European machinery, it yields its oil to make our paints and varnishes. Rice can be grown on a large as well as a small scale. Factory methods help to standardize the product. Sisal, rubber, tea, coffee, cotton, minerals, tobacco, oil, off they go to all parts of the world. There are no longer any slaves for sale. But this is all the Europeans' Africa. It depends on black labor, and all around it is another Africa, the old Africa, the Africans. The white man can plant tea and export it. He can introduce modern machinery. He can pay Africans to pick the tea and work the machines. But what effect does all this have on the African's existence? Are straggling labor lines a good enough substitute for the social life of the villages? The country is naturally poor. Great stretches are arid and barren. The African's Africa is still primitive. They make their pottery without even a potter's wheel. Their tribal background is still with them. They still dance as our ancestors must have danced. Agriculture is one of shifting cultivation. Their grains, like millet, are often poor in nutritional value. And they live in windowless huts. Day in, day out, endless labor is spent on pounding the grain by hand. Some tribes possess cattle, but what counts is generally the number of beasts that a man owns, not their quality or the value of their products. Rinderpest and other diseases take heavy toll. And in the background is the tsetse fly, which renders huge tracts uninhabitable by cattle. To get rid of tsetse, you must burn the bush or clear it in other ways. Nor is Africa a healthy place for the Africans. The tsetse transmits sleeping sickness to man as well as disease to cattle. Malaria is everywhere. Sometimes farms have to be abandoned because malaria is so bad. In flowing streams, the malarial mosquitoes cannot breed. But in stagnant waters, they are dangerous. For one swamp that can be filled in, there are hundreds still spreading fever. The wigglers that will hatch into mosquitoes can't live under a film of oil. But armies of men would be needed to spray all the marshes and pools of this vast region. There is too much disease, too many parasites, sapping African energy. Lepers once roamed England. They roam Africa today. They can be well looked after, some of them even cured of their disease. but unfortunately, there is no room for all of them. Poverty, disease, backwardness. How can we tackle them? Only by a partnership between European and African. A partnership in which the African is trained to deal with his own problems. Man lives off the land. The land, badly cultivated, becomes useless. Gullies eat it out. Rain washes away the soil and floods the fields. The European can teach the African how to avoid erosion by planting or by contour cultivation to stop the water carrying away the soil. When land has been cleared of tsetse, it can be resettled and cultivated. Africans can be trained in the proper methods of clearance. They can put up more huts, or they can learn to make bricks and build better houses with windows and separate rooms. The white man is devising inoculations against rinderpest. But these will be of no avail unless the African is willing to use the new methods. Africans are hungry for food, they're hungry for health, they're hungry for education. That is why the British taxpayer is helping the development of the colonies. Education includes health. Wherever there is a child welfare clinic, African mothers are learning. There are too few clinics and there are too few schools. But where schools exist, the partnership between European and African people and European and African ideas is obvious. Africans learn how and what to teach other Africans. The primary school is not all book learning. The children are educated in cleanliness. Are taught how to cook and how to sew. Boys march gaily off with their band to learn new methods of cultivation in the school garden. Perhaps much of the old African life is bound to go. But the white man is helping to put something in its place. Above all, there's needed a partnership of knowledge. Secondary schools have their quads and their dormitories. The pioneers in Eastern Africa wouldn't have believed what Africans can learn and do. Medical students learn the secrets of the human body. African girls qualify as trained nurses. Today, European and African surgeons operate together. And African doctors are practicing among their own people. It's no longer just white man's magic. Special workers examine water for pests like malaria mosquitoes. East Africans are learning other techniques that would have seemed beyond the bounds of possibility a short half-century ago. Here are the beginnings of a new culture which has its roots deep in the old. Africans have learnt the skilled jobs of modern steelwork. The country couldn't be run without these educated Africans. Many offences are tried by native law. In big towns, there may be elaborate law courts, entirely African, with a bench drawn from several tribes. The clerk takes down the evidence. The procedure is a blend of European and African. African councils have taken on much of the business of local government. Meanwhile, old institutions persist with their traditions. In many areas, chiefs still meet their people in ceremonial state. This chief is being presented with an offering of first fruits. This is now a symbol only. For today, taxes are paid in money. Eastern Africa has a host of problems pressing upon it. Legacies of the bad old days of the Arab slave trade. Disputes over land between white settlers and African cultivators. Difficulties over wage labor in mines and plantations. Difficulties over health, over sanitation, over agriculture, over better feeding. Above all looms the problem of how to bring modern civilization to tribal culture without destroying what was good in the old, without sacrificing human values in the process. There is no single recipe. We must experiment, but the experiments must be experiments in partnership between Europeans and Africans. Their chief aim to give more responsibility to the Africans themselves.